Well, welcome everybody to our first Center Stage Coffee Club. I hope you've got your coffee ready.
Absolutely, we have.
We have ours.
So today our guests are Julie Gray and Gidon Lev, the author and subject matter of the book
True Adventures of Gidon Lev.
Rascal, Holocaust Survivor and Optimist. I love that.
Yes.
So let's get started. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for agreeing to talk to us. That's amazing.
So I'd like...
We're big fans of the theater, you know.
Thanks, and that's what I wanted to bring up, was that that was where we met you, actually. We had our show in November 2019.
Yes.
Our very first show, when the theatre still smelled of paint and welding. We had the last rate of Theresienstadt. And only after the show did I find out that Gidon was actually in the audience.
Yeah, you had an important guest there that evening. It was a great show.
Absolutely. So
that seems like a million years ago, doesn't it? Like before the virus. Like
it does.
going to see a play. We can't wait for that to change again, huh?
No, yeah, hoping for change.
You're not the only one. You're not the only one. No. I'm going to ask Yedida to please turn off her camera if she doesn't mind, her video.
Thanks, Yedida.
Hi, Yedida.
Nice coffee cup.
I love it.
You don't have ours.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Have a new guest.
So we were talking about how we met you at the theater, and that started off our at least getting to know you and the talk about you guys and Gidon and his whole experience in Theresienstadt leading up to this book. But I'm going to let Grant sort of already introduce you, Julie, so we know who you are as well, because I'm sure as we read the book, we're also going to get to know Gidon. So,
Quite a bit.
I sort of get to know both of us.
both of you.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the truth. That's actually the words I was looking for, Julie, when Gidon just said that the book is such a tapestry of both lives, the new and the old, and the history, and that's what really captured me.
Risk in writing it that way. You know, I felt like books about Holocaust survivors are very important, but two things are happening right now. On the one hand, more and more people are ignorant about the Holocaust as anti-Semitism is rising, but they're also bored of reading stuff about it. That's nonfiction. World War II fiction books sell very well, but nonfiction books about the Holocaust, people don't want to read them. So I said, how on earth am I going to get people to pay attention to this book? And I knew I would have to do something that nobody had done before. I don't believe there's any other book about the Holocaust that was written the way this book was written. So I took a big chance, but people are liking it so far. So, you know.
It's paid off. That's great.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I was in a bit of a quandary about how to do the interview, whether I should ask you a question, then get on a question, then you a question. but I've basically kept it all to you for the start to talk about the book, and then I've got a few questions for Gidon towards the end.
Very good.
So don't feel left out at all.
I don't. Believe me, I don't.
Feel free to
chirp in
whenever you feel like it. So, oh, I saw that, Julie. I saw that.
Sorry.
No, that's good.
You can tell
He makes
who's
me crazy.
you can tell who's in charge here.
You can do a little bit something about it. Anyway, go ahead, Grant.
Okay. So the first comment I had was, I'm quoting you from
That's fine.
yeah, it took some convincing to get you to write this book. Can you tell us about that? And you finally agreed to do it.
His charm. See, this is what's going to happen. But he's right. He's right. You know, I didn't want to work on his book because I'm primarily a nonfiction writer, but I'm a fiction editor. So when I met Gidon, I knew he had a really special story, but I don't edit that kind of work. And he also had written, you know, thousands and thousands of words, but they were unorganized. It was a sprawling project, and it just wasn't my specialty. I'm not a Holocaust scholar. I'm not a scholar of history. I knew his story was pretty important, and so I really wasn't the right person for it. But Gidon really wanted to work with me, and we just sort of fell for each other. He was so charming. We kept meeting for coffee and strudel in our neighborhood in Ramat Gan. And pretty soon it just became personal for me. I thought, okay, I don't know how to do this, but because not only does a story matter to the world, but he matters to me. And I wasn't going to walk away from that.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
I have another little question which I don't have prepared. Gidon, how long have you been working on the Gidon? Was it the Gidon project?
Yes, I tell you what happened. My wife died in 2012.
Susan.
Susan, yes. We had been married 40 years.
Yes.
We actually knew each other 50, but we were married 40 years. And about half a year after she died, I decided, you know, why don't I write down a little bit of my life? It's been a fairly long life. It's been ups and downs, struggles, surviving, this and that. And I sat there and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And people were encouraging me, right. By the time I got to meet Julie, I had some 80,000 words already. And then I decided, okay, now how are we gonna make this into a book? And I was recommended to somebody, and that somebody recommended Julie. And almost from the first time we met, this young, pretty woman, you know, there was so much life and so much joy and so much warmth coming from her that I said, okay, maybe. And then we actually decided, okay, I'll call him, she said. And she called me, and we met another time.
Yeah, I asked him out on a date. I said, the first time we met, I said, I cannot work on this book, but you are so darling. Let's have coffee. And that was it. That was 3 years ago. And
that was more than 3 years.
Oh, wow. Wow, I love that story. I love that. It's so now I'm going to ask you, Julie. You know, you said that you had to read so many books about the Holocaust while you were writing this story, and I'm sure it got very kind of heavy and you felt overloaded. How long did it take you to really research everything and write the book? How long did that whole process take?
You know, I had read a lot of books about the Holocaust before I started the project. So a lot of it was going back for research. So it took me about 2.5 years to not write the book. For 2.5 years, I freaked out that I couldn't write the book. And during that time, I researched and I moaned and complained and whinged and emailed friends. And I just couldn't, for almost 2.5 years. And Gidon kept saying, how's the book coming? I'm like, great, terrific. I'm just totally fine. And then last fall, I decided to take a sabbatical. I ceased all my editing work, and I spent 4 months writing the book from dawn till dusk. You remember that time. It was rainy, it was winter, and I said, I'm just going to do it. So it took me only 4 months to take all this writing and notes and kind of put it together but then from those 4 months, it took another 3-4 months to then make it good and edited and all that. But the research I did, on and off continually, including going to Theresienstadt with Gidon and Yad Vashem and Bet Terezin, and
That was
a lot of research.
So when you write your books in those 4 months that you wrote it, did you even see Gidon at all? Were you locked away in a room?
You got shuffled out for coffee now and again, right?
No, look, finally we were living together in the same apartment. So it's not so easy to get away from it.
But I did. The other thing I want to point out was that after the book was in a second or third draft, I hired two fact checkers. One who was a historian in Israeli conflict, and the other who was a Holocaust studies fact checker. So I had it fact checked by two experts because I was so afraid of getting something wrong, even a small detail. So I did a lot of my own research, but then I turned to some really smart people to make sure I got it right.
well,
And I think it's important to mention now that this book is it is about Gidon being a Holocaust survivor, but it's so much more than that, right?
Exactly. If I can add to this, my whole idea was, and I made this quite clear to Julie, that I don't want this book to be just the Holocaust. There's a lot of it. And for the first 30 years after the Holocaust, I hardly spoke about the Holocaust. I didn't think about it. I was concentrating on today, now.
yes. Yes.
Exist, make life, and go on living. So that the Holocaust is part of the book, but isn't the only part, and sometimes not even the main part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. That's good.
My next question is, you've used 3 interesting and descriptive works in the subtitle. The True Adventures of Gidon Lev, Rascal, Holocaust Survivor, and Optimist. And I thought those 3 words would make a great name for the book.
I don't know how we came upon
Why those 3 words?
Why those 3 words? Yeah, I almost
True
understand.
Adventures. I thought right away because, as the main title, because it's fun. It kind of has this campy cowboy, the True Adventures of Gidon Lev. And that's how I imagine Gidon, sort of charging across the landscape like Don Quixote. But, every book needs a subtitle. And I knew that I had to use the word Holocaust. I had to say that was a part of the book. But I didn't want it to be prominent. So I described, and so I added optimist as the last word because you would never imagine a Holocaust survivor as being optimist, much less a rascal. And the fact is, while that does describe Gidon very well, that sort of is another conversation about how we perceive Holocaust survivors and survivors of other terrible tragedies, that they must be lonely and depressed, that this tragedy defined them in their totality. It doesn't. So the title of my book is sort of trying to be clear about some of the topicality of the book, but also to describe this person and all survivors of such things.
There's something in my mind I remember reading about, and it's going to bug me because I can't remember the name of the person, but is a Holocaust survivor who came out with the most optimistic, beautiful quotes, full of love and compassion, and it was quite sort of surprising because of what he went through, and yet was able to maintain his humanity and his optimism and his love of people and love of life. So just your saying that reminded me very much. I will kick myself for not remembering who this is, but I will put it in somewhere.
We'll come to you the minute we're done here. It's on my...
Absolutely.
So Julie, we're down to our last question.
Okay.
For you. Well,
yes.
Kind of.
You said that being a convert and an American gave you insight into Gidon's story that proved valuable and life-changing. I'm also a convert, by the way, and we're exactly the same age, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what did you mean by that?
Well, what I meant by that was that for me, you know, because I converted, the Holocaust was something that I read about in books and movies, but I had no family members that were affected, right? And even when I married, my first husband was Jewish, which is when I converted, and his family hadn't either. They had fled the Ukraine during the pogroms. So being an American, you know, when you come to Israel and you ask Israelis about Holocaust survivors, they're used to their presence. That might be their grandfather or their, you know, it's in Israel, it's not uncommon. But being an American and a convert, I was kind of more struck by it. It moved me more, it upset me more, it engaged me more, because I don't take it as a normal part of my reality at all. So I think that helped me to sort of ask the questions of Gidon. And also because I was in the unique situation of being, Gidon is my life partner, or my loving life buddy, as I call him on Facebook. So I was able to, with Gidon, ask him questions that people might be afraid to ask a Holocaust survivor. But it was important, like, is that memory accurate? You know, tricky stuff that you're afraid, you know. And I did get a lot of help from Eva Hoffman, who wrote a great book called After Such Knowledge. She's listed in the acknowledgments. But Eva has written very many books, but she is quoted a couple times in my book, and she talks about second generation Holocaust trauma and what we talk about when we talk about the Holocaust. So I was I am such an intimate of Gidon's. We have such love and trust between us that I was able to ask him questions that, you know, somebody who didn't know him well might not have felt comfortable asking, and that he might not have been comfortable answering.
And I didn't think about it.
So yeah, I asked him some things that he was like, well, good point, you know. So yeah, so I had a real advantage here, I think, because I am an outsider. I'm not originally from Israel. I'm a Californian. I was not always Jewish in my life, you know, so I had this outside looking in.
So you didn't have baggage necessarily that would...
Exactly. I didn't have any of the baggage, but I had all the curiosity.
Amazing.
And the intelligence. Yes.
I think that comes through blatant. It's very clear. It's very clear. And it comes through, your relationship also comes through beautifully. I love it. It's wonderful and beautiful to see. So
I think without this kind of relationship, we wouldn't have come to this book. Because I had a couple of other editors recommended to me, and after meeting once or twice, I felt there's something missing. I don't just want a commercial relationship. I need more. And that's the Rascal part of it.
Or the Optimist.
Or the Optimist.
Look, as far as an optimist, believe me, I do not know where it comes from. I really don't. And these last few years, outside of this last year, I was speaking to students in high school, mostly in Tel Mayelim here in Tel Aviv, because I had a grandson there. And a number of times I was asked exactly that by the students, 15, 16-year-olds. How is it that you've gone through this and you feel so forward-looking, positive? Yeah. I try to explain, I'm not sure I succeeded. It comes from within.
Absolutely.
That's me.
I think it's a strength that comes from people who have gone through difficult situations and are able to internalize it and find the lesson learned or the growth. It's a terrible thing to say from a tragedy, but it's you know, you can't change what happened. So how do you move forward? And that's a far healthier way of looking at things, I think.
Mm.
And
you know, the whole time I was working on this book, I kept thinking, you know, what is the magical essence of this person? How? Yeah, I really, like, I want a bottle, you know, I call him vitamin G, you know, I want a bottle and sell vitamin G. You know, he's so playful and optimistic. And,
Too playful.
You go, well, okay, let's not. But, you know, what I want, but at the end of you know, writing this book, and as I continue to get to know Gidon, it's really just something he was born with. I mean, it's just within him. It's his personality. And he has, as I say in the book, he hasn't read all the self-help books that I have trying to own his way into more peace. He's just Gidon. He's just vitamin G. So if we can find a way to.
You know, I think. May I speak? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Partially, it is because of my mother. I think we wrote in the book, right?
Yes.
She oppressed, suppressed, and depressed me. And I reacted. I said,
In
in order to survive that, I had to go on. I had to fight against it, and it became part of me.
I like that.
That's interesting.
So I'm just going to go back to Theresienstadt just for a little bit, and then we'll leave that behind where it is, and acknowledge it and move on.
My philosophy is that everyone's got to buy and read the book.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to tell them about the book too much. Okay.
No.
We're with you on that philosophy.
Yes, absolutely.
We're just going to tease.
Exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, Gidon, when you were in Theresienstadt, you were a child.
Yes.
What is difficult to think about it? But what is your most vivid memory of that time?
You know, there are a number, and just remember, I came there as a 6-year-old.
Yes.
So that, fact is, I wasn't even 6 yet, because my birthday is in March, and we arrived there in December of 41. And there were, over the 4 years, there were a number of outstanding things that I remember. I remember being in a courtyard, huge courtyard, and the hangings of the 16 people, young people, because they tried to send a message out of the camp to their friends or relatives.
Right.
And I remember my mother pushing my head down so I wouldn't see. I remember my great-grandmother, before she was shipped off to Treblinka, standing in the corner of the train station in a lovely long black dress and saying to us in German, she was Dutch German, well, what do you think they can do to me? I'm an old woman. They won't do anything. I'm 83 years old. What do they want from me? Little did she know that she's going straight to the gas chambers. I remember, for example, sneaking up on a huge pile of potatoes in the middle of the night with a little open suitcase and trying to steal some potatoes while the German guard moved from A to B, and very strictly in straight line, and we timed it and took.
There's the Rascal part.
Those are some of the memories. But 4 years is a long time.
Yeah, it is. It is. But so my follow-on question on that is, in the book you say after the war you never considered a Jewish religious identity. Being a Jew meant building a country. Religion had nothing to do with it. So I want to ask you, is Israel a safe haven? Is it a place for Jews to come to when they're, what was your, did you have religion before you went into the camp? Did you lose it at the camp? I'm just trying to understand that whole concept.
Good, very good question. No, it is. Not everybody knows how to ask the right question. First of all, I come from a very secular family.
Yes.
On my mother's side, my grandfather, I was told that I don't remember him at all. He was a bank manager in a private bank. He was secular. He spoke German. He had fought in the First World War, and I don't believe he was religious at all.
Okay. So
But he
he
was
was
Jewish.
German.
He was Jewish.
Mhm.
What it exactly meant, I don't know. On my mother's side, I think my grandparents were a little bit more, on my father's side, they were a little bit more traditional Jewish. But I think we celebrated both Christmas and Hanukkah.
Yes.
But there was no, I really didn't know what it meant to be a religious Jew. So it's not something I had and gave up or lost. I never had it.
Okay.
And after the war, when nobody came back, including my father, and I prayed for weeks on end every morning on my knees, lying on my knees and praying, Lieber God, dear God, bring my father back, and he didn't come back. I said, for me, there is no God. If God is so cruel to do this to me, to us,
Yes.
I don't want to believe in such a God.
It's a very similar story to my grandmother is German from Berlin, and she after the war, she also came from a very well. I don't think she was
They were
religious,
secular. They were very
but
secular.
but in the history there was a rabbi and whatever. But she completely lost her faith after the war, after the Holocaust. Same as you saying they can't be a God after this. They just can't be. So I understand you completely.
I'd like to
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to move along a little bit further in because we have such a strict time limit here. So,
So just to fill in tiny little bit.
yes,
Once I joined a Zionist youth group in Czechoslovakia after the war, the emphasis was build a new land, have our own land.
That
For
was
the Jews, whatever Jews are, religious, non-religious, it didn't matter, but the idea of having our own land, being able to defend yourself because this is your homeland, that caught me 100%, maybe more than 100%.
Hashomer Hatzair.
Yeah, well, I started in Dror, Echalutz HaTzair, which was Achdut Avodah, not Hashomer HaTzair.
Okay.
But the connection is pretty close. There's not great difference.
Right.
But because when I arrived in New York, in Prospect Park, I was invited by a few kids that were playing soccer to the club, sort of, yes.
Yes.
And then it turns out it was Hashomer HaTzair. But the fact that I found people who wanted me to come and start singing Israeli folk songs and songs and dance, that was it. From then on, I was a completely committed person to come to Israel.
okay.
Wow. Okay.
So that answered our question
Yeah,
about.
that was exactly my next question.
So when did you come to Israel?
I came in 59.
In 59.
1959, I spent in the youth movement. This is a socialist Zionist youth movement, as left Zionist as can be.
Right.
Zionist, yes. And once you were just a member, then as you grew older, you became a madrich, a counselor.
Yes.
And I was a counselor for quite some time. And I was even sent to Chicago to rebuild, together with two others, a branch that had died out. And after that, in 58, I was sent to the training farm in Hightstown, New Jersey, where for the first time we learned about farming, because that's what their goal was, to go to kibbutz and become a farmer.
I was going to ask that because I was a member of Habonim Dror in South Africa, and every year we used to have camps, and the main goal was to make Aliyah
Exactly.
to Israel and build it, and we had a kibbutz that was the kibbutz that you would make aliyah to if you were a Habonim member. So it was very, that was instilled in me as well in South Africa. Although I didn't make aliyah to kibbutz, but you did, right?
Went straight from the boat to the kibbutz.
Which kibbutz?
Kibbutz Hazorea,
Yeah.
which is in Emek, Israel. We were picked up, there were 7 of us or 8 of us on the boat. The kibbutz sent a truck, all type of truck with benches on the side.
Yes.
We piled onto the truck with our suitcases, and 35 minutes later, we're on the kibbutz.
Wow. What did the kibbutz specialize in? What did it grow?
Well, kibbutz Hazorea, you know today Hazorea is Shomrat Hazorea furniture.
Oh.
But they had a big factory, Plastopil. All the bags of milk that we buy in bags were printed in this factory. But agriculture actually was a big branch, and I was a dairyman. I'd been trained to become a dairyman at the Hightstown, New Jersey farm. And I went to Rutgers for 4 months, what is called the husbandry course.
Oh,
So that's, if you have any profession, that is my profession and my love.
Cows.
Cows.
Still today, when we drive around Israel, God
not,
forbid if we see a dairy, we have to stop and have to look at all the stinky cows. And everybody in the dairy knows Gidon because he used to be a milk tester. So I like to avoid stinky dairies, but Gidon likes to go see his friends, the cows and the workers.
You also spent some time on Zikim, which is down
exactly, down by the Gaza Strip.
by the Gaza Strip.
Yes. Now you want to ask me why?
Yes.
I'll explain. It's somewhat interesting. At that time, in the 60s, all the well-established kibbutzim would help out the newer ones, the ones that were only established in the 50s. And there were maybe a dozen, maybe even more like that. And every well-established kibbutz was asked to adopt a younger kibbutz and send every year anything between 5 and 10 of its members to spend a year there to work, to help with organizing, to add to the culture, to deepen the social connections between the people. And I was one of those, together with my first wife, to be sent there in 1966. And we liked it so much that we decided after a year not to go back to Hazorea, but to stay in Zikim.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now,
That's interesting.
yeah, it is, isn't it? So you've been all of this you describe in your book, obviously your whole life, and if you look at Israel now, what is how do you feel about it? Where it's headed, where it's going? I mean, it's very different from that original, very kind of Zionistic Israel that was in its heyday in the 50s and 60s. What is your feeling about that? Of looking, what do you see now of Israel, and how do you feel about it?
Okay, another good question.
Sorry.
It's not easy to answer. Because look, I love Israel as a country.
Yes.
And in these last couple of years, Julie and I have done a good amount of traveling, and I've showed Julie areas that she had never known that existed.
With cows.
Not with her.
With and without cows.
But it is not the ideal Israel that I had thought of. Because just remember, I belong to a very socialist, Zionist youth movement and kibbutz.
Yes.
And the idea was that we would create if not a socialist society, a somewhat more humane society, somewhat more based on equality between people. and we're a little bit far from that today. Still, things change, and I haven't given up on Israel.
Good on you. Good on you.
I,
I like that.
I haven't given up on Israel.
He was just
I
at a
think there's-
protest the other day, actually. He made a big sign.
I protest, and I answer people on Facebook. What's the name? That woman that is now the Minister of Transportation.
Miri Regev?
Every time I see her, I dig away at her. But
All artists, I say thank you. She used to be the Minister of Culture. So.
I know, terrible.
Yeah.
My son, who is a dancer,
Mm.
he said he's the worst thing that can happen to the cultural ministry.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How's
And-
he doing now during this time?
Excuse me?
How is your son doing being a dancer during this time when
My son is right now living in Brussels.
Oh,
He got married, and he's dancing and creating. He's totally independent, and he creates things which are very much under, what would you call it?
He's kind of a performance artist, and he's been doing these outdoor festivals
oh,
in and around Brussels, which you can do. I mean, you know,
Yes.
he had been a part of the Bachata dance company years ago. He's a really gifted dancer, but he's a real provocateur, very interesting person. But he's kind of been taking it out of doors, and a lot of people are going to his festivals. It's quite amazing.
mm. Yeah, that's it's great that they're taking it outdoors. For us, it's like we built the theater. It's indoors. What are you going to do? But
No, he
Take
also
the
did.
roof
He
off.
also did a Zoom.
Yeah, he also did a performance on Zoom.
A
That's right.
performance on Zoom in his apartment in Brussels.
Oh, wow.
So that's
Brilliant.
what we're trying to do. We're trying to do a whole lot of things on Zoom that we can that will keep us
Yeah,
We're doing it right now.
yeah.
right now. Absolutely. So tell me about your family. Who are they? Where are they?
You have six kids, right, Gidon? You've had
I
six.
have 6 children.
Yes.
6 children. 2 from my first marriage.
Yes.
One is here in Israel, lives on Kibbutz Mishmar Emek, also right next to Hazuria, and he has 4 children. And I have a daughter who lives in United States in Santa Cruz. She's a yoga teacher, and she's my oldest,
Yes.
and she's a lovely person, and I love her dearly. And she's the one that you see in the book I didn't manage to bring back when my first wife kidnapped him to the United States.
Yes, I heard that. So that's why you have to read the book, people.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's quite traumatic, to put it mildly.
So Julie, I want to put a question to you. I'm sorry that I'm taking over some
No,
questions
we're
here.
sort of starting to wrap up, I think.
But for the people who are watching and who will watch, what do you say? Why should they read this book? I mean, it's what makes it really sort of, you know. I mean, I love the relationship that I'm seeing here. I love the humor and the optimism of Gidon. Can you give it like a tease onto why they should read the book? It's.
I think the thing that's really on my mind is the way people, and with all these crazy things in the news today, you know, with fake news and this and that, and things are so intense all over the world. And I think that people don't always know the context behind things. And the book is really a love letter to Gidon and to Israel and to the Jewish people. It's a love letter to all 3 of those ideas and people and concepts. And I wanted to really give people the backstory of where leadership can take people. That's why I have a whole chapter in the book about the reprisal in Lidice, which is that small village not far from Prague. It was not a Jewish village, but I included a whole chapter about exactly what the Nazis did to that village to show people, to remind people that fascist leaders and hate and intolerance don't end with the Jews or whomever.
Right.
You know, it affects everybody, and we need to be really conscious of the backstory and context. People who are very critical of Israel often don't even know about the British Mandate, which amazes me. So what I really wanted people to do was to look at one life of Gidon's and then zoom way back out and think about how these ripples throughout history and community and societies affect us today, right? Because Hitler wanted to make Germany great again, okay? So that's important to think about.
Yeah, and also considering our own government.
Yes, well, I always add to what Julie said, and that is, I think my book is broad enough and yet has enough details about certain aspects of our existence, my life, our life, that can actually not only give people a little wider perspective, but give them also a little bit of hope that even when struggling through the daily challenges of life, you can look forward to something better and not give up.
Absolutely.
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 Right. So what I'd like to do is end on a positive note. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wish we could go on for hours and hours.
Fascinating. Absolutely.
I saw that you've just been awarded, it was a review by the Midwest Book Review.
Yes.
D. Donovan, and he said here, it serves as another important invitation to remember and understand the atrocities of the past, but also as a lesson on how to celebrate the present and reform the future. Just carrying on what you just said, Gidon.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
That was beautiful.
And that was beautiful. So much.
We were tickled to death by that review. We you know, for both of us, we thought that's what we want a reader to experience, exactly what that review said. So we were very flattered.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
But thank you guys for having us. It's been really fun. And I hope, you know, I look forward to seeing the recording of this, and I hope that the viewers will check out our book.
And thank you for everyone who's joined us today.
I want thousands of people to rush and get it.
Not just buy it, but rush
to buy it.
Rush
and not just buy it, but repeat.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you guys on with us.
Thank
and it's
you.
been enlightening. Gidon, what a character. Julie, you're no less of a character, honey.
I guess that's why we like each other.
That's why, you see.
Absolutely.
I felt, what does this young, pretty woman want with this old guy?
Yeah.
When we first read. But here we are.
You are, and we can see what she likes in you, so don't worry about that.
Come on.
And,
all right.
Be healthy and all, and hopefully we'll get to
Absolutely.
meet in the flesh and meet face to face.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Thank you guys both so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, girl.
All right.
Thanks.
Stay good. Stay well, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.